Hello everyone, I'm Bets Golden. Thank you so much for joining me today. I actually am really kind of stoked about this video. I bought these layered stencils on a whim. I thought they were cool. I've seen the beautiful cards that people are using for them, and I thought those were really fun. However, I didn't know if I would get around to get much use out of them, but I was playing with them last night. I used a whole bunch of different mediums on them, and I found 5 that I really like. So I'm going to show you how to do that, how to use these layered stencils, and why the 5 I chose out of my stash with my mediums were the best option. These are detailed stencils, and basically what you do is you layer them. They come in, you have to buy them each separately. They're by Alt&New, and so you have the layered, the first layered one, which is this. And it's funny because when I first saw this, I thought you would lay this down second, but you don't. You lay this down first. And then this is the layered second one. Now, I've already used them, so that's why they're kind of gunked up, because I really went to town on them last night. And I'm going to just show you how you can use them. And then at the end of the video, I will show you pictures of the cards that I created, not only with the ones that I'm creating with you today, but the ones that I created last night just plain. Even the reject ones I'm going to show you, and I'll tell you as we go along why the mediums I used on some of them didn't exactly work. So let's move into the first thing that you can use on these. For each technique, you're going to notice that I do not only make sure that my stencil is adhered well to my cardstock, I also go ahead and adhere the cardstock to my craft mat. My craft mat may be changing throughout the video depending on what type of medium that I am using. But one thing I wanted to tell you guys is the purple tape is awesome. I have some of that. However, I also have a whole bunch of washi tape that I want to use up. I'm like almost at the end of the roll. And so I'm just going to be using washi tape today to hold my things in place, which is a wonderful alternative to your purple tape. So I'm going to be using ink. This is the first way that you can apply it, is with ink and a blending tool. And this is by Simon Says Stamps, and it's going to be their hybrid clementine and their hybrid rose apple. The reason why I decided to use this blend, and I'm going to be using the clementine on the stencil, the first layer, stencil, layer A. And the reason why I decided to use this ink is because it is a rather fast drying ink, and it is fairly vibrant. So I'm just going to go ahead and start to move this around. I really don't care if I get these blending, if it's like really intense in some areas and not so intense in others. That doesn't really bother me that much, because it's a flower, and flowers in nature have different shades and things like that to it. Now, what I did notice is this particular piece of the stencil is a little bit flimsy and it wants to move around. So whenever I work with that, I try to keep it in mind. I may forget though, as I'm going through this process, that I have to be super careful on top of that. So I am just going to get this color kind of laid out. It's a little bit muddy because I have used this color on top of other colors, and I actually have recently purchased, I've caved and I've went in and bought some Jennifer Pooler ink because I heard that they don't muddy like other colors do, and so I cannot wait to try that. Jennifer Pooler ink. I might, whip this out again, this stencil out again, and use it on here. So I'm just going to go over it again until I get the intensity that I like, and then we will go ahead and add on the second layer. And I'm going to use my same brush. All I have to do with this is just brush this off on a piece of scratch paper, and once it brushes off clear and I'm not getting any more ink, I can go ahead and switch over to my ink pad. Now, I have to tell you that usually at the end of a play session, I will go ahead and actually, clean the tip of, clean the bristles of my brush, and I'll let it air dry. I don't know if that's what you're supposed to do, but I do. So anyway, okay, I just want to make sure that I have all those spots in. I like that, and I'm going to go ahead and lay out the second on top of this. Before I lay out the second stencil on top, I wanted to just show you what this looks like with just this one down. It is beautiful. It is stunning. You could stop here and be done with it, but we're going to go ahead and lay that second stencil down. I'm going to do that off screen just to save some time. For the second layer, I'm going to be using some Rose Apple. Again, it's the Simon Says Hybrid little mini ink pads. I'm just going to load up my blending tool, and then I'm just going to go ahead and just go right on in and start to blend this through. If you don't want to get your fingers dirty and you have to touch the stencil, you can always use a sticky note and just put your hand on that. And that'll also avoid any kind of fingerprints throughout your image if you're using a water-soluble ink that doesn't dry quickly. This does dry quickly on this type of surface. If it was a slick surface, it would not, but with this ink on this type of surface, it does dry quickly. I'm going to show you the other one that I did with ink, and it was the, I used Tim Holtz Distress ink, not the Distress Oxide, but the Distress ink, and I actually added some droplets to that, so I'm going to show you that as soon as I reveal this. All right, I'm just going to go on back through, make sure that I hit all of my corners on this. And I will be trimming up the edges on it for my card base. So I don't really care that, you know, you can see where the tape was and things like that. I'm worried about the center part of this. All right, that looks like that is really nice coverage. So let me set that off to the side, and then let's go ahead and reveal our stencil. So see how gorgeous that is. It's so pretty. You can see all that wonderful detail. And the reason why ink works really well with this, I think, is because it is a detailed stencil. And so you want something that's kind of dry that can really get in and showcase those details. Whereas when you have a wet medium, which I'll show you some examples of super wet mediums that did not work well on this, and it was just because it was just too saturated, and it just, you know, it leaked and bled, and that's what makes these stencils so different than just a regular stencil. Is with a regular stencil, sometimes you can have a little bit of that that flow, and you don't have to have like perfectly crisp lines. But with this particular stencil set, I really wanted those crisp lines. So this was with the Simon Says hybrid inks, and then this is the one that I created last night with the Distress Oxide in lilac and broken china. Yeah, broken china and shaded lilac, and that was the Distress ink. And as you can see, I even went over afterwards and just splatted a little bit of water on it, and it really turned out very, very pretty. I probably wouldn't splatter water on it again, just because, you know, it really softens up those lines, and I want a crisp line like this, but it totally worked. Now, you know, Distress ink does move with liquid, so I would seal this with some hairspray so it will not move, or you can use the Distress glaze over this, rub that in, and that'll seal it as well. So don't despair if you love your Distress ink, but you tend to steer clear of them for something like this because you don't want it to move if it gets wet. You just have to seal it. It's as easy as that. Okay, we're gonna move on to spraying. I tried out 2 different kinds of sprays last night, or brands, and my favorite was the Dylusions brand. It was a really beautiful, vibrant color, and it required less than the other one that I used, which is good because this is a liquid. So I was super surprised that it even worked on this, because you do want your lines to be crisp to get that detail in, and this worked the best. I will show you the sample of my other one, and for those of you that are wondering, I actually am not a huge fan of Miss. However, with this particular, I like 2. I don't think that you need to have a ton of different sprays. I think a lot of them do the same thing, and whatever you can't, if there's an ink that has a spray, usually it does the same thing. That has been my, that's kind of been what I've come to the conclusion. So I stick with the Dylusions spray because their paint and their ink is a little bit different, her paint and her ink. And it's a very highly pigmented spray, which I really like. And then I also stick to Tattered Angels Glimmer Mist because that is a mica spray and shine, a little bit more transparent, and that's the other one I did. It turned out beautiful, but I'll show you that panel as soon as I'm done with this one. And as you can see, I am not worried about taping the stencil down because I'm not touching it at all. So I kind of let that set up a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and on top of the rose quartz, I'm going to do the blush. I am keeping in mind my color families with this. You know, I probably wouldn't want to throw an orange on top of this because it will mix, and and that could create some mud. So for this one, I just line it up, and again, it doesn't, oh, my knob. Let me go switch my color real quick. Okay, I got it to work. It just needed a little bit of love. All right, so that's kind of all I'm going to do on that one. Again, I don't want to get it too overly saturated or else the lines will start to mesh together. And then there you go. See how pretty that is. Look how gorgeous that is. I'm going to have to let that set up down there for a second, but let me show you the other one I did with this. And I used Pure Sunshine and Cherry Pie on this one. See how nice and crisp that is? So it's a really beautiful, vibrant color, these Dylusion inks are. So I love it with this type of stencil. And I was quite surprised that it worked, again, because it is so liquidy. I would think it wouldn't hold its shape, but it was really beautiful. And then this is the one that I did with Glimmer Mist, and it was with Cross My Heart and Sapphire. It's still pretty, it still worked, but again, it's a more of a softer effect, and you can see through, you can really see those beautiful watermarks and the spray marks, whereas on this it's not as apparent. So both of them are gorgeous, but I really wanted to show you how the spray that created the best image, which I think is the Dylusion spray. For the second technique, I'm going to be using some modeling paste, but I wanted to lay out the first stencil the same way that I did with the ink. However, I am actually, as I started this, I started with the Spice Marmalade, and then I'm like, I can blend that in with some Barn Door, and now I'm like, let me do some Picked Raspberry. So I just kind of want to show you this technique that I'm doing. It's nothing life-changing here, but basically I'm using the Archival Distress inks, and the reason is because I'm going to be putting a modeling paste down on top of this, and so I want to make sure that it's permanent and it does not move. And that is exactly what these inks do, is they allow for a waterproof, quick drying application. So I know that once I put on my modeling paste over top of this, it's not going to move. But I also thought it would be fun to just vary in some, see that one piece, some of just different colors, not real crazy in the sense that, you know, they're not real bright and bold, but I thought it would just be pretty just to have something else down for a beautiful card. So I put down Barn Door, Spiced Marmalade, and then this Picket Raspberry. And I'm just going to go ahead and just blend it through. And my blending brush is pretty much clean because I'm not getting any more transfer off, which is what I want. I don't want there to be any transfer, so I'm going to make sure I rub this off on a scratch piece of paper to get all the ink off in case there's any residual left. And now normally when you are blending colors, you really have to pay attention to the color family because you'll end up with mud. However, when you're working with an archival ink, which is acid-free, permanent, and waterproof, you don't have to be concerned with that too much because it will not mix with the other colors, so to speak. It blends kind of on top of the colors. But with that being said, I did go ahead and use a similar color family when I did this. These are all warm colors. Now, the one color that everybody has to be concerned about is purple, because it's called, basically, Dyan Reaveley calls it the color of sin, because it'll turn everything to mud with the exception of blues or reds. You can do blue, red, and purple together. You can do purple and red and like a pink and you'd be okay. You can do a purple, like a denim color, and a blue or a lagoon color and be okay. But you cannot mix purple, green, and blue. You'll end up with mud. You cannot mix purple, red, and orange. You'll end up with mud. However, with what I just did, I'm going to be able to layer on a purple top here. And my technique this time is actually modeling paste. That's what I'm going to do. That's the next technique, is modeling paste. And I didn't want to just use white modeling paste. I wanted to color it. My favorite thing to color modeling paste with is Color Burst. I did try to lay Color Burst out during this whole process over the stencils, because I love Color Burst on stencils and things. However, it was just too saturated and I didn't let it dry between two layers. And even if I did, once you get the Color Burst wet, it does act like it reactivates with water. So it moved too much for this particular project and for these stencils. However, I am going to be mixing some of my modeling paste with the Color Burst, and I'm going to create this orchid into my modeling paste, and I will be able to lay that out. What I love about Color Burst in modeling paste is, since it's a powdered pigment, it does not water down your modeling paste at all. So you're still going to get that textured look, which is fabulous. So let's go ahead and remove this stencil just to see what we're left with. And I did have to really tape the stencil down because of how much I was blending out. So that is super pretty on its own. So I'm going to go ahead and lay out the other stencil on top of this, and I'm going to get my modeling paste ready to go. I'm going to mix it together. I'll show you how I do that as well. And you can change the intensity of it just by adding more of your pigmented color. So I'm going to be doing the orchid. And the trick is with this technique is, if you're mixing in a pigment, you want to start out with a lighter hand and then add to it, because it's really hard to make this lighter unless you want to add more of your modeling paste. And this isn't like something you can save after you're done laying everything out, because you could put it in a jar and save it, but we can't put it back in here like normally you'd be able to. So I'm going to be keeping that in mind as I am mixing my color. My stencil's all lined up and really sealed on there well, and now I'm going to go ahead and just add in some of this orchid into my modeling paste like so. The wonderful thing about Color Burst is that it lasts forever, and it creates absolutely beautiful results. It's like one of my very favorite mediums to work with, because I can make a spray out of it. I can even make a mica spray out of it. I can just use it as watercolor paints. I can tap and sprinkle and spritz. I can do what I'm doing right now in creating a beautiful modeling paste. Some people don't like to mix it all the way in. They really like those little streaks of color, and those are super pretty as well. Okay, so I'm going to call this good, and I do have a streak. I think I'm just going to leave that, and I'm just going to apply it, and you want to kind of apply it all, and that was lifted a little and a little went under there, so that's unfortunate, but oh well. We go oops and we just move on. And so I'm just going to apply this all over, making sure I'm kind of going with the direction of the stencil. And I would really rather make up more modeling paste than have to throw it away. So I try to do just what I need, but sometimes I fall short, which is better than having too much. This looks like it's going to be just enough. So I'm just evening it out. Now with modeling paste, you do want to wash everything quickly after you get it laid, because once it dries, you're kind of out of luck at that point. It will dry and it's permanent. So just keep that in mind when you're working with it. And I made sure that I pushed everything down into the appropriate little nooks and crannies. And then from here, we're going to lift it. But I'm just really, I can't save this. I'm not going to save it. If I was smart, I would have another background ready to go that I could lay any excess on. But I didn't do that. So I'm just really making sure that I have it covered well. And this is pretty well. Now, if you were wanting to save it, you could easily scrape up like that top layer. And in fact, I'll just do that so you guys can see. You would just scrape off that top layer and you would be left with the correct amount. So here we go. We're going to lift this up. Again, it's going to hold its peaks and things, and I messed up there, but you know what we say? We go, oops, oh well, and we move on. I will keep that in mind as I create my card. No big deal. But look how pretty that turned out. See how gorgeous that is? And when it dries, it's going to dry with all of that extra dimension and texture, which is so amazing. So very pretty. Now let me show you what happened on my panel when I used the color burst. Okay, when I used the color burst, this is what it did. I'm still going to use it. It's still pretty. I didn't get mud. I kept the color families. I respected them. So I'm still going to use this on a card, but it just didn't give me, you know, this. So I'm super excited I can incorporate color burst with these stencils by using it with modeling paste. The other thing you can do is you can use glimmer paste by Nuvo has it. And this is what I did with the glimmer paste. It works beautifully. It's so pretty. It doesn't hold its peaks necessarily as well as a modeling paste does, just because that glitter has some texture on it, and it tended to kind of get up underneath the stencil a little bit more so than your paste like this did. All right, let's go on to the next technique. So this next technique, I'm actually going to be using one of my very favorite products right now. You guys have seen me use it on videos in the past, and that is the blends. And I'm going to be blending it with the hydrangea and the leaf. And then I'm going to actually use the clear to emboss it with some ultra fine embossing powder. The reason why I'm doing the Brutus Monroe icicle is because it embosses clear and there's a little bit of a shine to it. It's kind of like a sparkle, like an icicle. And I really like his embossing powders because there's no wax in them and they just really melt beautifully. I'm not doing a thick embossing powder on this because I only want I don't want it to run. Sometimes when you do a thicker embossing powder, it's really cool because it's liquidy and it's fluid and it kind of runs, and I don't want that with this. I want it all to kind of hold its place. So the first thing I need to do is I need to put down my first layer, and I think I'm going to do my first layer with the leaf, and then I'm going to top it off with the blue one. So just a little dollop over there. I'm going to be using my blending tool. Mine are, I love these things. You could use a sponge if you wanted to, but these blending brushes work really nice with the stencils. I like to use my blends with baby wipes, but the baby wipe and the stencil just were not being very friendly last night. So I opted to do it this way. So I'm just going to blend this through. And again, I don't really care if it's like perfect coverage. I actually prefer it not to be perfect coverage. And you know, that one piece right there, just being careful not to maneuver around that too much. And I am going to hit this with a heat gun for a minute because it does stay wet for not forever, but I'm going to be layering on another color, and so I want to keep the lines nice and crisp. So I'm going to take off the stencil and I will hit it with a heat gun, and then I'll layer my next stencil on, and I will do this same technique like I've been doing the whole time with the hydrangea. I think that's how you say it. I make up words, you guys, like for real. I mean, I do. I make up words. I had dyslexia as a child. I still actually have it, but I've learned how to work with it. And so I make up words. So anyway, I don't always read them right. It's kind of funny. You could use a little bit of water in your blends, but I'm not going to because I just want to keep the lines as crisp as possible. So let me go ahead and just take this off. And don't fret over how much washi tape I use. I never go through an entire thing of washi tape, and I would rather use it to hold things in place than just to have it sit on my shelf and never get used. So you may not feel that way. That's okay, but this is what I kind of use it for. I have way too much of this stuff. I love it, but I'll never use it all. So see how pretty that is just as it is right now? I'm going to go ahead and just hit this with a heat gun. I'll layer on the next stencil, and then from there I will blend it out and we'll go ahead and emboss it. So for the second layer, I'm going to go ahead and line, I can't even talk, go ahead and use this blend on it. And then I'm going to use the clear embossing over that, and we will emboss it, and it's going to be beautiful. This is such a fun technique. So I'm just going to layer this on up. I'll go ahead and finish this off screen, and then we will lay out the clear blend. That's laid out. I'm going to go ahead and just blend in some of the clear. Now, I'm not going to go ahead and like worry about cleaning off my brush because I'm just laying it on over the blue. So I'm just going to rub this on over the blue. And as you can see, if you're looking at your stencil, some of it did leak under. And that's because, you know, this is a wet medium. So that is to be expected. However, it's not horrible, so to speak. So I'm just going to do another layer of the clear, starting on this side and working my way in. And then we'll go ahead and emboss it. All right, so that's pretty good coverage right there. So let me just go ahead and pick this up. Woo, sliding everywhere. Sorry, guys. And since this is an embossing ink, it will stay wet for a little bit. So far, so pretty. So I'll be able to clean that off just fine with a little bit of water. It'll come right up. And again, I'm going to use my ultra fine embossing powder on this. And as you can see, it kind of leaked in some areas. And I'll take that into consideration as I put the card together that I create with this. So it is wet, so I want to be careful as I pick it up. And the beauty of embossing is you can dump the whole jar on and you'll save it. I always like to take the little tip off of my Tidy Craft before I start to layer up the embossing powder, because it can be cumbersome to try to take that off when you have embossing powder in your tray. And I am just going over the top like so. Gonna let that run off down there and kind of hit it this way and then just go back down. And I have a pretty good coverage. Now from here, I'm going to set this aside because I can put that all back in my jar, and I'm just going to hit it with my heat gun, and you're going to see how it starts to shine. Do you see the difference? Isn't that so pretty? A little hot still. Careful after you get done embossing it. Kind of let it cool down for a couple seconds. So this is this one. And then yesterday I created this one with the wild berry uniform. And then I used the same embossing powder, the icicle, over top with the clear. So it really creates a stunning background, these blends do, with the clear ink. One thing to keep in mind with blends is they are created to work together. They are called blends for a reason. They blend. So that is why my blue started to blend in with my green. So keep that in mind when you are mixing your colors. You want to be respectful of the color family with this. I have one more technique to show you, and this one kind of surprised me because I haven't this is embarrassing. I haven't used it forever, and it was late last night, and I saw it as I was pulling out my embossing powder, and I thought, let's give it a go. It ended up being beautiful. It's one of my favorites to use with these stencils. This is a surprising technique to me because I am ashamed to say that I have not chalked in years. I'm pretty sure that this is about 15 years old, this set. I will try to find a chalk set that's similar and list it in the supplies down below. And of course, I always will have the supplies that I can find for you listed in the description box. So make sure you check that out. Anyway, chalk on this is beautiful. It is it's like a softer, yet it keeps the integrity of the stencil. So I am going to go ahead and just use some chalk on this, and I'm going to use a couple different types of colors. I don't even know what these colors are. And again, I'm just going to keep this one, you know, this leaf right here, this pesky leaf. I need to keep that in mind, and I'm just going to lay out some of this color all around, and then once I get one color laid out, I'm going to go ahead and add in another color, but I'm going to make sure I blow off the dust because the dust will intermix with the other color, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you know, you might not, it might be easier to work with if you're not looking at a whole bunch of dust. So I am just, no rhyme, no reason, just going through and adding on some color. Kind of all over the place. And it's a really beautiful, cool effect. And these chalks actually shimmer. So that's what I'm going to do with this first color. I'm going to blow it off. And then I'm going to go ahead and lay on a second color. And this time I'm going to actually lay on a similar color, staying in kind of that red tone. All over the place here. And I will go through and work in, I think I'm going to work in a little bit of purple on this. And then I'll show you what I'm going to do with the top layer, that layer B. I love, love, love the effect of black on this for your layer B. It is so cool. Okay, so I'm going to put on some purple. And depending on the size of your little, I don't know what it is, cotton swab, whatever, will determine how fine this goes on. So I'm just layering on some in spots. I'm not gonna worry about it everywhere, but just some fun spots here and there on the petals with the purple. No rhyme, no reason. Just kind of giving it a little bit more dimension, actually. That's what this kind of does. All right, so I think that this is going to be good. Let me blow this off. Let's remove this. Sorry, my whole family's home. That's why it's so loud. Let me go ahead and just remove this piece. So you can see. So see how pretty that is already with all the pretty colors. So let me go ahead and get the next piece lined up, and then we will finish it off in some black. I went ahead and finished up covering it in the black chalk. Sorry, didn't mean to smash my head in there, but I noticed that there were some little chalk dust, and I wanted to get that up before I removed it because I don't want to smear it. You do want to be careful with your fingers on this, and just because you will get fingerprints in it, I'm going to go ahead and actually, I pulled up some of mine with the washi tape. Oopsie. I'm going to go ahead and just seal mine with some hairspray. You can always do that. But look how pretty that is. I love the chalk effect. Whoop! Didn't mean to do that. I love, isn't that, oh shit. I love the chalk effect. Isn't that just beautiful? So pretty. And if you heard me just go OS, it's because my phone is about to die, the camera. And so it kind of gave me a blank screen and I thought I went dead. So that's why I just cursed a little. If you heard it, oops, sorry. Not really. All right. So this is with the beautiful chalk in like a pink, in the reds and the purple and then the black. And then this is the chalk that I did last night with the blue and the black. How pretty is that? I really love the chalk effect. Let me show you two techniques that I tried, and the results were not what I had hoped for, so I didn't share them with you. And it could just be because I need to play with it some more. This is the Dylusions Lilac and Grape, and I used the baby wipe on it. It just did not hold its definition well. It's not as defined. And I think it's because I love the Dylusions paint because you can move it so much. But for a technique like this, the stencil is so detailed that the baby wipe not only adds moisture as well as the paint, but the baby wipe is hard to maneuver around the stencil pieces, and so it can create some blotchiness and actually like lift color and things like that. So I don't recommend, I'm not I'm not going to say I don't recommend, I just need to get better at it. And then the other one that I did was the gelatos. And again, the stencil was really detailed, which didn't lend itself well to direct gelato, and the baby wipe I used to rub it out. It's still pretty, but it's just not as detailed as I had hoped for. So I did not share those two techniques today just because I don't feel like I have a really good grasp on them as of yet. Make sure you stick around if you're interested to see what I do with these. Make sure you stick around and watch the pictures that I'm going to throw up on the at the end of this video with all the projects I did. And then if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so. I would really appreciate it. It helps me. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does help keep my channel up and functioning so I can buy more products to showcase to you guys. Also, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Leave me any questions or comments down below. And if you want to see anything, let me know and I'll try to play with it. I can't always do requests because I may not always have the product on hand right away, or I just may need to practice, but I do love suggestions. And if I do a suggestion, I will definitely pick it from something that a viewer recommended. Also, check out the supplies in the description box and my blog as well. Until next time, happy crafting!